جسور التشيك. اليوم موعدنا مع أرض القلاع والتاريخ والسحر لنبحر معا في رحلة ممتعة للتشيك. رسمياً جمهورية التشيك والمعروفة سابقاً باسم بوهيميا، تقع التشيك في وسط أوروبا، تحدها النمسا من الجنوب وألمانيا من الغرب وبولندا من الشمال الشرقي وسلوفاكيا من الشرق. لقاءنا هيكون مع سعادة سفير دولة التشيك السيد إيفان ويوكل. Welcome to our program, Excellency. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tahrit. You are always welcome here at the embassy.
وكان لنا لقاء مع سعادة سفير جمهورية التشيك لدى مصر السفير إيفان يوكل، والذي اهتم أن يحكي لي الطراز المعماري الفريد لأكبر مجمع معماري بين السفارات التشيكية في أفريقيا، والذي تم إنشاؤه من قبل المهندس المعماري كارل فيلساك بالتعاون مع فيدما تومس من استوديو في معهد مدينة براغ للتصميم. تم بناء المجمع بين عامي 1977 و 1980، والسمة الغالبة للمجمع والذي يقع مرمى البصر من أهرامات الجيزة هو برج سكني لموظفي السفارة، ولكنه كبير ويتمتع بروح وأسلوب مميز للمهندس الذي قام ببناء وهو فيلساك، وهو مميز في العمارة التشيكية، وبدأ هذا الأسلوب في الستينيات. We have a long history of cooperation, and we have a long diplomatic relation between Egypt and the Czech Republic, but not the Czech Republic, but it was Czechoslovakia before. Can we go back to the state? Because it's much older.
Yes, you're right. Actually, the history of our relationship is more than 100 years old. Uh-huh. But before I start to elaborate on the history of Czech-Egyptian diplomatic relationship, let me express one Czech word which actually summarizes the whole. This word actually has its roots in old Egyptian Arabic language. Okay. In Czech it's called sadik, but in Arabic it's sadiki, which is a friend. And this name was given to the first boat which Czech Egyptologists built on Nile to be able to pursue their research and restoration of old Egyptian artifacts in Nubia. So Sadik was a Czech laboratory and dormitory on the Nile, and it was the most sincere expression of the relationship of Czech Egyptologists to Egypt.
So, Excellency, you were talking about foundation of the council in Alexandria.
Yes.
It started 1920, but you told me no, it started really 1922.
Well, of course, you are right that we established diplomatic representation in Egypt in 1920 as Czechoslovakia. But sometimes what we call in Czech the devil is in detail. We start to count our diplomatic relationship since 1922 when we opened actually representation in Cairo, because at that time Egypt was also politically independent country. So sometimes you think it's a history, but look today, there are even today some nations who deny even existence to some other nations, not talking just about political independence. So sometimes it's very important to distinguish the period because both countries, Egypt and Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia at the time, wish to have as most independent and fruitful relationship. So this happened in 1922. Last year we celebrated 100 years of this relation, and it's very colorful, I have to say.
تم تم تشييد المباني من الخرسانة وشرائح من النوافذ الزجاجية التي تعبر عن الواجهة غير المزخرفة. اللون البيج للواجهة الخارجية كي يذكرنا بلون رمال الصحراء. Excellence, we have many fields of cooperation. Yes. In maybe the first or the important one is Egyptology. Yes. So you have a lot of Egyptologists here in Egypt, and you have a mission in Abu Sir. Yes. So we have also a book talks about Egyptology, and maybe you have professors of Egyptology in the Czech Republic.
Yes. Well, the book you see here is actually kind of summary of our history. I mean, in terms of Egyptology in Egypt. If you allow me, I can show you
Please.
The boat on the Nile.
Okay, it's the first one in Aswan, or
yes, it was the Sadiq.
A Sadiq.
Look at this. This is the Sadiq. So this is the laboratory and dormitory, and our Egyptologists, they were really like Indiana Jones. You know? We had to do it all by ourselves.
You don't have the head of Dr. Zahi?
No. But really, believe me, it's something which really accelerated our relationship. Before I talk about our Egyptologists, why do we have here this book, this medal, and the train?
Yes. The train. We all of us remember the Magari train, but you told me there is also a Czech train.
Exactly. There are also Czech trains or Czechoslovak trains, so to say, coming from 50s and 60s here in Egypt. And this train is produced by a company which is the name which every Egyptian remembers. Actually, if you remember the time, or our ancestors remember the time, 1922, it was Czech entrepreneurs who were asking the government, please support us. Egypt is gate to Africa. We would like to join your diplomatic efforts and to develop very fruitful and pragmatic partnerships. So this train symbolizes actually Czech industry, which has been present in Egypt for ages. Of course, you mentioned the glassworks, the crystal glass.
Yes, and crystals.
Yeah.
It's very popular here in Egypt.
I know.
If somebody is going to marry, so he prefers to have Czech crystals and lamps and everything.
Exactly. So it's a long-lasting history since the first moment of our relationship. Here, this is a medal. If you actually look at the detail, you will see the military plane. Why the military plane? It's actually part of our modern history because, of course, what's one of the crucial interest of the whole world is the peace and stability in Sinai. And actually Czech contingent is the part of MFO, which is present in 2 camps in Sinai. And this is something which is not very known, and I think it's worth mentioning it. Getting back to your question about Egyptology,
yes,
of course, this is where we started. Even before the birth of Czechoslovakia, the first Czech Egyptologist, he was actually a professor who was joining actually Garibaldi's army for unification of Italy, so he was traveling all around the world, but his Czech heart was always in Egypt, and he contributed to the birth of the new discipline, which became formalized in form of Czechoslovak Egyptological Institute in the 60s. So since then we started to take part on these restorations,
excavations and restorations,
and so on. And today we are present in Abu Sir.
In Abu Sir, okay.
Where we have concession to work, and where actually one of those, I think, the most important discoveries in the history were done. I don't want to go too much to details.
Yeah, okay.
But for instance, one of our professors, Professor Barta, whose books you can see here.
Very, very important and very famous statues.
Exactly. So he, of course, tries to popularize Egyptology also in the Czech Republic. And actually, his focus, or one of his focuses, is to find a link between old Egyptian civilization and the future of our civilizations.
And he found already the link?
Yes, there are quite many links. Actually, if you open this book, you find there two interesting photos. People in Tahrir Square around Egyptian Museum keeping or holding her hands, like symbolically defending the heritage of old Egypt. On the next page, you find actually people in old Czechoslovakia in 1989 who hundreds of thousands of people met in front of the National Museum symbolically to defend the traditions from the first Czechoslovak Republic. So, and of course, what was common for those events, that actually the former social contract collapsed. So the Czechoslovakia and Czech Republic after 1989 are different than before. Also Egypt after 2011 is different than before. But actually what Professor Barta says, the origins of this kind of social contracts in the world are actually in Egypt. Actually the first pyramid in Saqqara is symbolizing this because Djoser he built this, but his father, his grave was still in the tomb. So what happened within 20 years, that finally people created this kind of social contract and they're willing to build pyramid. So this is the way how our Egyptologists are trying to link history and future.
Very interesting.
And to try to find parallels between creation of bureaucracy.
العلاقات بين مصر والتشيك علاقات تاريخية وراسخة، وقد تم الاحتفال بمرور قرن من العلاقات. العلاقات القوية بين البلدين تشير إلى تعاون في مجالات عديدة، منها الاقتصاد والأبحاث والاستثمار والتنمية. Since 2 years ago, a visit from your Foreign Affairs Minister to Egypt. Can you mention the most important outcomes of this visit?
Well, one of the outcomes is not really visible. It's actually continuity. Because there has always been tradition between our top executive representatives to exchange views and ideas about political situation in the region, sometimes even in the whole world. So, of course, our Minister of Foreign Affairs was received by His Excellency President Sisi. So it was a political dialogue or continuation of political dialogue. But secondly, which refers to our tradition, they opened together a workshop of our entrepreneurs, also to have a dialogue in business and trade. So, and this kind of activity goes on. Inshallah, we can invite and we can receive your president in Prague quite soon. This is what we are working together also with Egyptian Embassy in Prague. And of course, what we need are the positive topics for cooperation. Business, technology, research, innovation. And of course, the visit 2 years ago actually was an inspiration how to, or which directions we should go.
Did you participate during the COP27 here in Sharm el-Sheikh?
Yes, it's very important to say that Czech Republic was there not only on their own, but it was representing the EU, because at that time Czech Republic was a president of the EU, or the presidency of the EU. So of course we were actively participating on the level of our Prime Minister.
Okay.
We were advocating two main topics, decarbonization, or so to say clean air.
Okay.
You know,
yes.
But how can you have clean air if you sacrifice the resources of the earth? So the other topic is actually, so to say, climate neutrality. So whatever you do in industry, it might be climate neutral, not only in industry, but actually each human activity. So of course, at the end of the day, if the economy will be driven by non-carbon technologies,
yes,
non-methane technologies, that's the vision. And of course, we presented some deadlines, 2035, 2050, depending which kind of topic we pursue. But generally said, we were very active, and I think it was very successful representation, not only of the Czech Republic, but also of the EU.
كانت هناك زيارة من قبل وزير خارجية جمهورية التشيك إلى مصر، والذي أكد على عمق العلاقات المصرية التشيكية، معرباً عن الاهتمام الكبير بزيادة حجم التعاون مع مصر لتوطين في مختلف المجالات ومنها قطاع النقل، لافتاً إلى أن جمهورية التشيك ستتعاون مع مصر لتوطين صناعة النقل في مصر. فقد كان هناك لقاء بين الفريق المهندس كامل الوزير وزير النقل وجيري كوزاك نائب وزير خارجية جمهورية التشيك في قطاع النقل، وحضر اللقاء السفير إيفان يوكل سفير جمهورية التشيك لدى القاهرة. فالدولة المصرية تسابق الزمن لتوطين كافة صناعات النقل في مصر. We want to talk about a very nice cooperation in the field of literature, and I see here you have many books are translated to Arabic language. So how far is this cooperation?
I have to tell you, Kafka. Yes, Franz Kafka. Yes, but I have to tell you one thing. I spent nearly 6 years in Finland.
In Finland?
Yes,
okay.
And of course part of my job was to find translators of the Czech literature. And it was quite difficult, we found out, but I was thinking it will be much difficult in Egypt, which is more distant, which culturally differs from Central Eastern Europe. But actually, to my surprise, I found, in the best sense of the word, a colony of people who love Czech language, who are committed to translate not only historical literature. I mean, Kafka comes from to the beginning of the 20th century, but also a modern literature written by best female writers in my country, dealing with issues very modern, equality, democracy, difference between life in the countryside and the city, urbanization, mythology. So what is very important to say before we start to talk about literature is this colony, because the only university in Africa is the Ain Shams, where we can have teachers of the Czech language and students of the Czech language. There are actually around 167 students of Czech language in Ain Shams. I met them 2 weeks ago. And those students are future guides, maybe
guides
in
or
Hurghada,
translators.
translators, assistants, professors, maybe also new founders of new departments on other universities in Egypt. So without those people, there wouldn't have been any translations like this.
مصر تزخر بمصادر متعددة ومتنوعة للجذب السياحي تشمل الجوانب الثقافية والتاريخية والبيئية، فقد اكتشفت البعثة الأثرية التشيكية التابعة للمعهد التشيكي لعلم المصريات عن خبيئة لمواد التحنيط، وذلك أثناء أعمال الحفر الأثري، وتضمنت الخبيئة على بئر ضخم تبلغ قياساته 5.3 في 5.3 متر وعمق أكثر من 14 متراً، يحتوي على مواد التحنيط الفريدة من نوعها، تتكون من 370 إناء فخارية كبيرة الحجم مقسمة إلى 14 مجموعة، تضم كل مجموعة من 7 إلى 52 إناء. تتضمن هذه الأواني بقايا مواد كانت تستخدم أثناء عملية التحنيط. You had a visit since 2 months ago from a professor of architect, and he was very interested in Egyptian architecture and Islamic architecture, and he's very well known in the Czech Republic. So I noticed that we have some parts of our architect here in Egypt related to the Czech Republic.
Of course, those architects are not linked to the Czech Republic by itself, but to the territory of the Czech Republic where we are today. I can just mention 2 examples. One of them is Oskar Horowitz, who built what's called Tiering House for the Austrian buyer or tradesman, Mr. Tiering, which is located at the Ataba Square.
Ataba Square.
Yes. Yes.
This nice building.
Yes, this very nice building with a nice
Everybody
coupole.
knows it.
It's written Tiering, which is Austrian name of the buyer, but of course the architect was Czech. And secondly, it's even more hidden that actually the finishing of former Gezira Palais, which is now by the Czech architect called Mr. Šmorans.
Šmorans.
Yes.
He is a famous Czech architect.
He's famous for his deeds in Egypt, actually. We actually historically had quite many famous architects, but Gezira Palais is actually a masterpiece.
It's a masterpiece. Where else?
Well, sometimes it's very difficult to distinguish whether the architect was Czech or Polish or Austrian, because of course we belong before 1918, we belong to the Austrian Empire. But some of the mosques here even in Egypt were built by the team around Max Herz.
Like Sultan Hassan.
Yes. So there were also Czechs.
He's one of the famous architects.
Which were part of the team, which was team of, so to say, Austro-Hungarian Empire. So this is also something we are trying or continuing to discover.
Excellency, I thought Baroque style is related to the French people, not to the Czech Republic.
Czech Republic is a small country, so also the houses, the palace, the statues are not so numerous as you can find in Italy or in France. But we developed also our own style in Baroque. The classical one you can find everywhere in Prague, for instance, the statues on Charles Bridge, which is actually an invitation for coming to Prague.
Thank you.
But we had also one architect, Jan Blažej Santini, who developed his own architectural style by combining classic Baroque and Gothics. So his masterpieces are also UNESCO protected, and it's also another invitation to the Czech countryside.
I think Prague is related to the UNESCO.
Prague, of course, but
it's on the list.
This is some of the stereotypes about my country, that just Prague is the center.
Yeah.
But if you are an architecture geek, don't hesitate and go to see our countryside, namely the Baroque churches built by Mr. Santini.
ونعود مرة أخرى إلى دولة التشيك ومدينة بوهيميا عاصمة الكريستال الأوروبية. يقترن اسم تشيكيا في العالم بالكريستال. يعود أصل كلمة كريستال إلى اليونانية القديمة، حيث كان اليونانيون القدماء يطلقون هذه الكلمة على الجليد، أي على الماء الذي يتواجد في حالة تصلب، وبالتالي فإن مواصفاته تكمن في النظافة والشفافية والبرودة. وكان اليونانيون يفاجئون عندما تتحول المياه السائلة إلى ما يشبه الحجر، غير أنهم توصلوا بعد فترة إلى أنه يوجد في الجبال شيء يشبه الجليد من النظرة الأولى، فهو بدون لون وشفاف وبارد، ولكنه ليس ماء، ولذلك أطلقوا عليه اسم الكريستال الجبلي. وفيما بعد ساعدت التكنولوجيا وبذل جهود لاحقاً للوصول إلى شكل هذا الكريستال. انتظرونا لاستكمال لقائنا مع سعادة سفير جمهورية التشيك السفير إيفان يوكل، وتسليط الضوء على العلاقات المصرية وجسور ممتدة.